So we were talking about experiments and experimenting with firms. And that's true that, I mean, in what I've been trying to do, I mean, once you talk to the firm and get something going and you need something that's identified, you come up with a kind of a couple of messages and it's true. It's not like the real complete experiment that you would like to conduct. And maybe with governments, there's more kind of leverage to do that kind of bigger types of experiment than with firms directly on the one, you know, on one basis. It's basically maybe the way to go. But I think on the other hand, I mean, experiments in some ways, what they do is also getting us to talk to companies and telling them what we think is important, and engaging them. So it's always just there's a scientific objective of getting some result and proving something, but there is also the kind of, you know, how can we do this together? What types of solutions could we find and how can we be creative? And having this dialogue is really important. So maybe experiments not the only way to do this, but how can we engage corporations in talking to us and, you know, thinking about new practices with us?
How do you answer that question, Maggie? And Irene, you were talking about this too, about having more impact. So if you'd like to comment, go ahead.
And the other thing is that you have to keep in mind, that's why I hired a behavioral economist into my team. Because I think that what we need to do is actually work with the organizations and see what things work, right? Because there's cultures within organizations as well. So it's fascinating. But anyway, there's so much to do and so little time, but I'm hoping that other people will take this on, the baton, and do some of this work.
And Paul, you have your hand raised, so go ahead.
Yes, it was just on the question of field experiments, which seem so promising and, as Maggie was saying, a potentially terrific way to engage businesses. I think the downside, as I've seen it played out, at least, field experiments seem to have the same limitation as lab experiments do in social psychology, that to get a rigorously defined field experiment, you have to narrow the questions terribly relative to the big ambitions and systemic concerns that we've just been talking about. The interdependencies, all of those just have to be somehow magically controlled for. And hats off to our colleagues who are able to design clever field experiments that somehow encapsulate that complexity. But as with a lot of social psychology, it seems like that sort of the lab condition of a controlled experiment in the field is just as constraining. And so always eager to see what creative colleagues can do using these different research strategies. But I don't hold out great hope that field experiments are going to be our salvation.
Oh yeah, I don't either, Paul. But I'm excited to see that someone can come present something in like a business school setting to my strategy colleagues, and having done something with real organizations and tried to change their behavior and then seen the outcome of it, and that be okay. Because without that setting, I think, you know, Andy was asking earlier, have we been forced to bring our questions down to being very minute and small in order to gain legitimacy and journalism? Absolutely, I would say we have. But I think that happens across every field. I mean, you know, I pick up virtually any management journal, and a lot of the work you see is very incremental and very small moves. I just find it as a technique that can help get away. I also think qualitative comparative analysis is another emerging technique that I have hope in. I'm not saying these things solve everything by any means, but to me, they're different tools for different levels, right? You find something in the field experiment, and then you try to go see, does that hold across a large scale database, and come back to it. I don't really know what else we can do.